Hi ho ho, it's me, Mia Goth, back at it again with a new episode of the Boy Time Podcast, and as always, I'm joined by just Babby.
I'm Paul.
I'm Paul. Paul's gone. He had his wisdom teeth taken out, so it's just me and Babby today, which is fine, I guess. I don't
I
really,
suppose.
yeah, I don't think we really have anything that he would have any insights on to talk about today. But, that's fine. Today is week 3 of the Halloween movie marathon. We're talking about some slasher movies of the 80s, namely Friday the 13th 1, Friday the 13th 4, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. The big ones, I guess. Not Halloween, but we'll talk about Halloween a little bit. But I think before we get into that, we do have a little bit of news, something that's kind of interesting. I guess good timing, as it were, because we just talked about Frankenstein over the last 2 episodes, both the original and then the Curse of Frankenstein. Well, we just got some announcements from Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein that he is currently working on, namely who the cast is going to be. And I have to say, I don't know how I feel about this, but I have learned to trust GDT, so I think it'll be pretty good. The first one is Mia Goth as the bride, and that's great. That's really good casting. She's been in those Pearl and X movies recently. She was also in it's one of the Cronenbergs. Was it David Cronenberg's Infinity Pool? I don't know.
Idea.
I know it's him and his son. They both make body horror movies, and it's very confusing to know which one is which, especially since they're both making movies right now. So, sorry, it's a little bit confusing. But it's the one that, I don't remember who else was in it. I just remember seeing the poster where she's like, ah, and she's like screaming. Not the poster, the trailer. So she's the bride. I think that's a great pick. Oscar Isaac is playing the monster. This one is, I feel a little questionable just because Oscar Isaac's not a very big guy. I like Oscar Isaac a lot, but I don't know if I think maybe he should have been Dr. Frankenstein. That would have been a good pick. But instead, who we got for Dr. Frankenstein is Andrew Garfield, Spider-Man himself. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Andrew Garfield as Dr. Frankenstein. I guess I could see it, but I don't know. I feel like Oscar Isaac is maybe a better pick. And then I don't know who I would pick as the monster. Honestly, it's Guillermo del Toro. Get Ron Perlman. That would be great. He's already kind of a weird looking fella. Real funny looking, if you will. So I think that would be pretty good. But we'll see. But I just thought that was kind of funny because we just talked about Frankenstein, and I guess I know this is one of the last couple of live action movies that Del Toro wants to make before completely switching to making animated movies. Because I think he's I don't know, this is one that he's been contracted to do for a while. I think that this movie was originally going to be a part of the Universal's Dark Universe. That thing that started with the Tom Cruise Mummy movie, and then that movie flopped, and then they dropped it. I think this movie was supposed to be the second one in that. So, if that gives any frame of reference for how long this movie has been in development hell. Although I think it's kind of funny because I think originally it was just going to be a Bride of Frankenstein movie, which is kind of questionable because how are you going to have Bride of Frankenstein before Frankenstein? It just doesn't really seem to compute. But I guess Well, I was gonna say you want like a female-led movie after the male-led movie, but the mummy in the mummy is a woman, so I don't know. Well, the mummy in the Tom Cruise mummy, the mummy in the original one is played by the same guy who played the Frankenstein in the '30s Frankenstein movie, and then in the Brendan Fraser one, he is not played by the guy who played Frankenstein in the 1931 Frankenstein movie.
Don't forget the Scorpion King.
I was going to see if we could avoid talking about the Scorpion King.
Never.
Where the Dwayne The Rock Johnson plays a CGI Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Which is kind of funny. He's in the news because there was a wax sculpture of him that made him white.
Oh, yeah, I did see that. That was interesting.
I don't know. I like that, like, he had to come out and be like, hey, can you change it? Because I'm not white. So, yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. But that's pretty much it for news in terms of stuff. I do kind of want to talk about Spider-Man 2 because it came out. I'm not going to go super in depth or give any spoilers or anything like that. I haven't beaten the game yet, so I don't even know all of the things to spoil, but I did kind of want to give a first impressions. I've been playing it for about 5 days. I think as of us recording, it's been 5 days. I haven't had a whole lot of time. I've been kind of busy doing stuff. So I haven't had a whole lot of time. I think I'm maybe halfway through the main story. I'm not sure. It does seem to be building towards something, but I don't know. It's kind of twisting and turning in a way that I wasn't expecting. But let's talk a little more about the game in a more general sense. Avoid the story as much as possible. But yeah, so this game, you're playing as both Peter and Miles. I would say that Miles' story is fine. It's like classic Spider-Man stuff. Basically, think like, I guess, Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi movie, where it's like he has to balance being Spider-Man and being Miles Morales. This is really tough. But unlike Spider-Man 2, he does not lose his powers miraculously and then have a good time not being Spider-Man. Miles just, he keeps his powers. So, and then, I don't really want to get into all of it, but it is just kind of like that. It's very basic. And then Peter's story is like, well, I mean, he gets like the black suit. We know that from the cover of the box. I guess, I don't know if we want to talk about that. There was a little bit of a controversy surrounding that where a bunch of people bought physical release. I think it's like the best selling PlayStation Studios game, I think on the PS5 in terms of physical release, and it just basically copied the data from the disc onto the PS5, so it just had to download it through the disc, which does take less time than downloading it through the internet, but I think a lot of people were upset where it was like, why even buy the disc or buy a physical release if it's just going to download the PS5? Fair point. I always get physical releases now. So, and this isn't the norm, I don't think, if I'm remembering right. Like when I bought God of War Ragnarok, I don't think it did that. But and people got upset at this too, but Fallout 76, there wasn't even a disc. It was just a round cardboard circle that had a download key on it. So what even was the point? That one really is, what even is the point if there's no disc? Just to have a case, I guess, to put on your shelf. But yeah, so there was a little bit of that. I would say the combat is a little, I don't know. I think I may have made the mistake of playing the first Spider-Man game like a week or so before playing this new one. So I was very used to how that game handled, and this game handles a little differently. It's not as easy just to web up guys and then stick them to the wall, which I think was the meta of that first game. Is just it's very easy just to like get a group of bad guys, throw out a web bomb and then a concussion blast, and then just stick the entire group to the wall, and then it's like, okay, that entire encounter is over. I think they tried to limit that. It's not as easy to stick a bunch of enemies to the wall. It's also like the when you like web throw an enemy, there's a little bit of a lead up, like a second or two before the spin animation starts, and in that time you are vulnerable to attack. So it's combat is not just web up people and stick them to walls anymore. It's actually a little tougher. There's a parry mechanic, which frankly I'm not a fan of. Not in general. In this game, I think Spider-Man is not who you pick if you're going to do a parry mechanic. Wolverine, sure, do a parry mechanic. That would be perfect. But Spider-Man is a more agile type guy, more dodging, which the first game, I think the only way to not get hit is to dodge, and I think that's the way to do it. But with that said, I do think that parrying does make combat a little more engaging. It's very. I'm playing on the hardest difficulty, which is maybe a mistake, but I usually always do that. I don't know why. And it's hard. I played the first one. I played it on the hardest difficulty, and I'm like, I think I may have died a couple times in the whole playthrough. Man, I am dying like 10 times to the same boss. It is tough. And I think when you increase the difficulty, the dodge window is shorter, and also the parry window is shorter. And now there are hits that you can only parry, you can't dodge away, and also there are some that you can only dodge and you can't parry. So it's kind of like, I know that there's a game that's done something like this. I guess Sekiro is kind of like that, where there are certain moves that you have to do, certain attacks to evade or counter. It's kind of like that. Obviously, this is not the Dark Souls of superhero games. I don't really want to make that comparison. Completely throw my
Everything's
credibility.
Dark Souls.
Everything is Dark Souls. This game really isn't. I think the first game it's like Arkham City, and I want to say like Assassin's Creed kind of had a baby, which sounds like bad, but in terms of like the open world, it reminds me a lot of like a modern Assassin's Creed game where there's like the towers that you have to, go to reveal the map, and then there's a bunch of collectibles that are optional. There aren't a bunch of Riddler trophies everywhere, unfortunately. But yeah, so in this new one, it's like there's no towers, but it's kind of old school, where it's like you have to physically go to each location, every single spot in a district in order to reveal it, which I think is pretty cool. Like, I haven't seen that in a long time, and it's not something I necessarily hate. And also, the traversal in this game is way faster than the first one. A lot of that comes with the introduction of the wings, the little glide suit, which when I first started the game, I was not a fan of at all. I'm like, man, web swinging is one of the most satisfying mechanics in like any game. It's up there with like grappling hooks as being like some of the funnest things that can be put in a game. It's just instantly like, oh yeah, there's a grappling hook. It's like, oh yeah, I'm playing a spider. Well, I guess it isn't really in any other games where it's like, oh yeah, I'm in Halo and now there's web swinging. I guess that's not really a thing. But it is like the reason you play a Spider-Man game since Spider-Man 2 is to swing around New York City. And I'm like, oh, well, this whole game is kind of busted now. It just became like Just Cause, where it's like, well, why wouldn't I just websuit or wingsuit around because it's way faster? But I think that's just because your swing speed when you start is really slow for some reason. There are upgrades that you can make to your swing speed, and that of course was the branch that I did first, upgraded it all the way, and I now it feels really good to swing. I have my swing speed to maximum. I do think that is kind of a misstep because I do think that's probably what most people are playing this game for, are for the web swing mechanics. So a little, I think it could put some people off if they're like, oh well, web swinging doesn't feel good and it feels like the only like efficient way to get around is using these wings. Maybe. I don't think this game is perfect by any means. I don't think the first game is perfect, although I do think that the first game is probably the best Spider-Man game. So far, I do think that this game is better. It's just a little bit, I don't know. There's just like they kept some of the weird stuff from the first game that nobody liked. Like they kept the puzzles. It's like nobody liked doing the puzzles in the first Spider-Man game. Granted, the puzzles are better in this game. It isn't just BioShock, connect the pipes. It is actually kind of fun doing the puzzles, but it's still like I don't want to be doing puzzles. I'm a superhero. Even like when you're Batman and all of the Arkham games, when it's like you have to do a puzzle, it's like not even a puzzle. It's like a 5-second thing where you have to like twiddle your thumbs until you get the password right. There are puzzles in that game, but I don't know. It's different. Because when you do puzzles in the Arkham games, you're Batman. You're not on a screen doing a puzzle, which you are in the Spider-Man games. So that's a little unfortunate. Also, for some reason, and I don't know why they insist on this, they kept they kept Mary Jane sections in. And I think everybody hated the Mary Jane levels in the first Spider-Man game.
You don't want to sneak around a museum for 35 minutes?
No, I don't. Granted, she has a glicky now, and that's kind of cool. It's like a stun gun, I guess. So it is kind of like a more traditional stealth game, I guess. So yeah, you're kind of sneaking around, and then you can sneak up on people and blast them a couple times in the neck, and then they're knocked out. So that's kind of cool, but it's still like, this is a game called Spider-Man. I want to play as Spider-Man. Both of them, because both of them are really cool, and there's like different abilities and stuff. Like Peter has like the mechanical like arms, the Iron Spider arms, and then Miles has his invisibility and his electric powers. So it's like, there's cool stuff that both of them can do. It doesn't feel like, oh, well, why would I play as Peter when I can play as Miles? I feel like both of them are pretty equal in terms of gameplay. I will say that both of them are not equal in terms of suits. Peter's suits are way better than Miles, and I feel like a lot of that has to come from Miles hasn't been around as long as Peter Parker has, so there aren't as many like comics and stories and hell, even movies to like draw inspiration from and make suits. Like pretty much all of Peter's suits are like, this is his appearance as, Like, this is the Amazing Spider-Man 1 suit. This is the Sam Raimi suit. This is the Ben Reilly Scarlet Spider suit. This is Tom Holland's Spider-Man suit. And then Miles has just like a bunch of kind of lamer versions of the kind of original suit. Of course, there is the Spider-Verse suit. There's actually two, which I love. There's the there's the one that you think of, the, I guess, across the Spider-Verse, where it's just, you know, his traditional black and red suit. And then there's also his suit from the beginning of Into the Spider-Verse, where he's wearing like the Spider-Man costume and a yellow cape. I love that. I love that they included that for you know, really no reason. I would have loved it if they did the Spider-Verse suit in the What Up Danger sequence, because that is one of my favorite Spider-Man moments, period. The kind of streetwear. There is a streetwear suit, but it, you know, it's not in the Spider-Verse style, which I guess it doesn't have to be. But yeah, I think I'll give it a while to talk about the story. I haven't even finished it yet. And even then I probably won't talk about like the ending or anything like that, but there are things I want to talk about in the story. I think there's some missteps. I think, I don't know. It's not a perfect story, but I'm liking it. I think that's pretty much where I'll leave it right now. It's definitely worth your time and money, I think. This isn't like it's kind of rare that like a AAA game comes out and it isn't like completely buggy and broken on launch. That being said, it's not perfect in that regard. I have had a couple crashes, but I mean, I don't think it wasn't in like pivotal moments. It wasn't like in the middle of a story mission. For some reason, it was only happening in the open world, so it didn't really matter because I was just like swinging around and then it crashed and then I opened the game back up and it was fine. I don't know if people are having moments where it crashes in story missions and they have to start over, because that's pretty bad. But I mean, other than that, it's been relatively glitch free. I've had some moments where I knock out an enemy over a throwable object and then the classic thing happens where like one limb gets stuck in it and then they like start spinning around really fast. You know what I'm talking about.
That's a classic.
It's a classic. So it's not perfect by any means, but it isn't like unplayable. Far from it. I think it's actually really well done in terms of a AAA release these days. And maybe that's not saying anything, but I don't know. It's pretty good. I would recommend it. So I'll probably talk about it later once the game has some more time to breathe. I do want to address the Miles suit that everyone is talking about because it is god-awful. I haven't unlocked that one yet, but I am going to unlock it as soon as possible, and see what other styles there are. That is something I forgot to mention, is that most suits have like 3 other color swatches that you can unlock. I don't know if that's one of them. Most of the ones that don't have the color swatches are like direct movie ones. So like you can't have a different colored like Raimi suit or Homecoming suit or something like that. But like all of the like comic book ones, those tend to be free game. It tends to. I don't know. I don't have all of the suits, but yeah, I don't know. Pretty good. Check it out if you want to. If you're into the Spider-Man, which I am. So there you go. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about before our movie marathon, week 3, the 80s slasher craze. So I guess we'll get started with that. It's kind of hard to talk about the 80s slasher craze and not talk about Halloween, because that is the movie that started it. It's not the first slasher movie. I don't want anyone in the comments saying, actually, did you know that Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out like 5 years before Halloween? Yes, I did. But I hate that movie, and Halloween's way better. Not that that really makes a difference. But it's important to talk about Halloween because it more or less is the thing that the Friday the 13th franchise is ripping off, which is something they are not shy about. Like, if you see interviews from the creators of Friday the 13th, they were basically like, yeah, we saw Halloween and we wanted to do that, but like cheaper and like have boobs in it because we want teenagers to watch it. And so like that's what Friday the 13th was. I guess still is. I don't know. We'll see, because I think A24 has the rights to the Friday the 13th prequel show. It's like Camp Crystal Lake or something. Don't know how they're going to do that. But so I watched the first Friday the 13th and then the fourth one. The first one is regarded by many to be very bad, and I would agree. It is not good at all. I think the only memorable thing about this movie are the famous Frank Ziti. Frank Ziti. I don't know how we keep talking about Frank Ziti. He's not that prolific, but I guess he is, because he's been in like, I don't know, like 5 podcast episodes in the last 2 months. So I guess for those uninitiated, Frank Ziti is the Boy Time podcast name for Tom Savini, because I couldn't think of his name one week and I said it was something like Frank Ziti. And it's not. It's Tom Savini. But he did all of the practical effects for the first Friday the 13th and the fourth one. I think the story goes that Frank Ziti did the practical effects for the first one, and then when the second one was going to be made, they were like, hey, Jason's going to be the killer now. And Tom Savini's like, what? No, that doesn't make any sense, because in the first one, Jason is barely in it. He's not the killer. His mom is. Spoilers? Who cares?
Everybody knows that.
Everybody knows that. And I gotta say, I did know that going in, and this movie just sucks. It's a whodunit slasher, which I guess that's not like Halloween at all. Halloween, it's Mike Myers, and he's like in the entire movie. But you barely see him. That's why he's scary. So it's a whodunit slasher. It's a bunch of teens in this Camp Crystal Lake. The locals call it Camp Blood because there was a couple killings like 10 years ago. But someone bought it and is trying to renovate it. And then that person left and has basically just left it with a bunch of teenagers that are going to be the counselors. But he's like, hey, you fix it up while I'm gone. And they don't do anything. They just kind of chill around. They go swimming. They play strip Monopoly. Kid stuff.
I think Monopoly might be the worst game to do that to.
I know. They were like, hey, let's play Monopoly. And they're like, I hate Monopoly. And then she's like, not how I play it. We're going to play strip Monopoly. Like, how does that work?
That's not a thing.
How does that work? You just land on someone's property, you have to take an article of clothing off?
I guess.
I guess so, too. I will say I was kind of surprised by the lack of nudity in this movie, because that is what these movies are known for, is just being all like sex scenes. I think this movie kind of this franchise kind of started the idea, or at least popularized it, that like if you have sex, you will die. In horror movies, anyway. There's a really great quote of this podcast, Film Spotting. I think one of the co-hosts, Josh, he's a Christian fella, and he has a book about like a Christian appreciation of horror movies. And he jokingly said that the Bible is more sex positive than horror movies, which is pretty funny because it is kind of true. Because if you have sex in any of these movies, that doesn't look good. Even in Nightmare on Elm Street, that's kind of the case. Even though it's a little more indirect in that one. But the whole reason that Jason's mom is killing people in the first Friday the 13th is that Jason was a camper at Camp Crystal Lake. He was like deformed, and so a lot of kids picked on him and stuff. And basically he drowned in the lake, and none of the counselors were around because they were having sex. So the mom is like, oh no, there's these teens in the woods and they're having sex with each other. I'm going to kill all these teens because they're like the counselors that like killed my son. And that kind of goes, it's a through line. I mean, I haven't seen 2 or 3. I just saw the 4th one, but it's kind of the same. And that one is that there's a bunch of teens that move into a rental house near the camp, I guess. And they're all fooling around with each other. And then Jason comes in and kills them all, in creative ways, but we'll get to that. But yeah, it's so if you didn't know that Jason's mom was the killer in the first Friday the 13th movie, I think you're supposed to be like, which one of these teens is killing all of the other people? Because a lot of the kills in this movie are like from the POV of the killer, and we're getting the reactions of the people they're killing being like, oh, hey, what are you doing out here? And then, oh, they get stabbed, but you never see it, because this movie's so lame. So I think you're supposed to believe like, oh, is this one of the other teens that's doing this? But then like by like, the end, and there's only like 2 people left, you're like, okay, well, neither of these people are the killers. Like, who is doing it then? Because they've both had like run-ins with dead bodies and are freaking out. So like, who is the killer? And then the one girl gets dead, and then there's the final girl, which is a trope with a lot of horror movies, especially during this period, but even to today. And I was like, okay, well then who's doing it? And then out of nowhere, in the last like 10 minutes, Jason's mom shows up, drops a bunch of exposition on why she's doing it, and then starts trying to kill the final girl. And it's like, okay, this is not the way to do that at all. If you're going to do a whodunit slasher, you need to have Jason's mom be a character that these people are talking to, and like maybe have her be like a really sympathetic person, and then like when something snaps, she starts killing people. Because right now it just feels really unsatisfying, because it's not a mystery if you like, it's not a satisfying mystery, I guess, if you aren't given all the pieces before the solution is revealed. Because it's just like, oh, okay, so you were just like hiding that the whole time. It doesn't feel like I could have figured that out by myself before the grand reveal, which I think a lot of movies do that. A lot of great mysteries hold like one final piece, and then once that's revealed, the entire thing is there. It's like, oh, okay, I get it. But this movie like hid like 10 pieces, and I was like, and then hid the box so you couldn't really tell what you were building, and the pieces were all brown. So it's just like I have no idea what is going on. But I did know what was going on, and it still was just like, what, why, how. So yeah, it was kind of okay. There was one interesting part of this movie, and it was at the very, very end. After the final girl, spoilers, I guess, chops off Jason's mom's head with the, I don't know if it was with a machete. I think it might have been with like a canoe oar. And then she like canoes herself out into the middle of the lake and passes out. It's like in the morning and there's like peaceful music, and then like the cops show up and they're like, "Oh, there she is. Let's go get her." And then a zombie Jason like jumps out of the water and pulls her down. I'm like, "Whoa, this is like the one kind of surprising thing that this movie's doing." And then it turns out to be a dream. And I hated this movie so much for doing that. So yeah. And then like she kind of peers into the distance and she like, "Oh, did you find the boy?" And then they're like, "No, we didn't find a boy." And then she's like, "Oh, well then I guess he's still in there." And then the closing credits are over a slow zoom into the lake, which didn't even end with a jump scare, if you will. So kind of lame. But the fourth one, I also didn't really like. I just think this franchise is not for me at all. But it's the best one for sure. Oh, I do need to bring up that I guess all three of these movies have like weird, like big stars before they were big, because the first Friday the 13th has Kevin Bacon in it. And I think this was like before Footloose and like all that, and like Tremors and stuff. So like before his like big break, and he was just in Friday the 13th 1. Friday the 13th 4 has, well, Corey Feldman. Come on.
Let's go.
You gotta love when Corey Feldman's in a picture. And Crispin Glover, who I don't know from much. I know that he's the dad in, I think, just the first Back to the Future movie. I think they replaced him in the second one. But he is giving probably the best performance I've ever seen in my entire life in the fourth Friday the 13th movie, where by this point, Jason is basically who you think. When you think Jason Voorhees, it's about this point where he's starting to look like that. In the second Friday the 13th movie, he has like a potato sack over his head that he cut holes out of. The third one, he gets the hockey mask. And like the one little bit of continuity between all of these movies is that there's like a notch in the Jason Voorhees mask, where in the third movie he gets an axe to the forehead, and that notch is in almost all of the Friday the 13th masks until the 10th one, which I think is the one where Jason goes to space, and he has like a weird, like kind of like a Bane mask kind of thing. But from 3 to 9 he has the same hockey mask with a little notch in the top. So he's basically who you're thinking of, Jason, at this point. He's not played by Kane Hodder, I think, at this point, who plays Jason. I don't know which ones he's in, but I think he's played Jason the most. The thing that makes Jason different than like Freddy Krueger is that like Jason, for the most part, is just played by like a stunt guy. And in some of them, he's played by like a really old stunt guy. So you can kind of tell like when he's running around that it's like, oh, that's like how an old person would run. So that's a little bit confusing. Where like Freddy Krueger is played by Robert Englund for not all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, because the remake did not have Robert Englund playing him, but we're not going to talk about that. But, the fourth Friday the 13th movie, very, very simple. There is the Jarvis family, where there's a mom, a girl, and Tommy Jarvis, played by Corey Feldman, who's very small. I think this might have been like his first role, because he's younger than he is in like Goonies and Stand By Me. Well, actually, I haven't seen Gremlins. I know he's in Gremlins. He might be younger in Gremlins. I'm not sure. But, it's around there. There's 4 big Corey Feldman movies, and I think those are it. Because after that, he started really focusing on his music career, and he's made some great albums. So
Fantastic, I might add.
fantastic albums. So he plays little Tommy Jarvis, who's basically like a little like Frank Ziti. Like he makes masks and like prosthetics, which is an interesting choice because he's like 8 and he's making like Frank Ziti level masks, but that's fine. And then next door is like a rental house, and a bunch of teens move in to Bone. And the main teens, there's this guy named Teddy Bear, and then Crispin Glover. I don't know what his name is. There's too many people to keep all these names down. I just know Tommy Jarvis, because I think he becomes like a recurring character in this franchise. And Crispin Glover is really upset because his buddy is like, because I think he just got broken up with or something, and his buddy's like, hey, you're a dead fuck, which I didn't know what that meant. But I guess that just means he's bad at sex. And he's feeling really sad about that, and Teddy Bear keeps bringing it up every time, and he's just like, Crispin Glover's like, man, I'm so sad, and then Teddy Bear's like, well, maybe it's because you're a dead fuck, and then Crispin Glover's like, stop calling me that. But luckily for him, he's feeling really sad and horny, which I think is a line in the movie. And luckily, they're walking down to the lake, and what do you know, 2 hot twins on bikes just so happen to ride by and are like, hey, we're going to the lake. Do you guys want to come with us? They're like, wow, we're also going to the lake. Let's all go to the lake and let's all skinny dip. And so there's just a bunch of, shots of naked ladies. Not a lot of naked dudes. There's a lot of scene or shots from the back where we just see male butt, but there's full frontal women. You got to see full frontal men. This is what we are advocates for here on The Boy Time.
Absolutely.
We need more hanging dong in pictures, if you will. If you're going to have nudity, you got to have both. That's what I'm going to say. So, yeah, there's just a lot of like, I don't even know how to describe them. They're just very like, okay, we're going to sitting the camera down. Okay, take your top off. And then it's just like, okay, I'm taking my clothes off. And it's, I don't even want to say like softcore porn. I guess it kind of is. I don't know. It's very like exploitative, I guess. It's fine, but so I think if there's anything that needs to be taken from this movie is how Crispin Glover dances, which I had seen a clip of before, but it did not prepare me for the scene in question where I don't even know why Crispin Glover dances the way he does. He like jerks around. And it's so weird because he's like, hey, hot babe twin, do you want to dance with me to this generic 80s hair metal band song that we could license because it was cheap? And she was like, yeah, I guess. And then like she gets up and then she's dancing kind of normally. And then Crispin Glover's like seizing out. Like it's so weird. I don't even know how to describe it. It's really something you need to see. because it's like the weirdest dance move ever. And I've heard that that's just how he danced. Like, that wasn't like, the director wasn't like, I want you to dance like a weirdo. He just apparently dances like that, which is hilarious. And it's a little sad I didn't see those moves in Back to the Future when Marty McFly is playing that Chuck Berry song. That would have really added to the scene, I think. And so, yeah, Crispin Glover's great. His famous line is, Ted, where the hell is corkscrew? And then he gets a corkscrew to the hand by Jason. It's like, there's the corkscrew. That's how Crispin Glover dies. I guess, spoilers. Everybody dies in every single Friday the 13th
Yeah, no.
movie. It's like all of these characters are just here to die. It is like the point of these movies is boobs and interesting deaths. And that's something to talk about too, I guess, with this movie is that Frank Ziti's back because yeah, for the second one, they're like, Jason's the killer now. And he's like, that doesn't make any sense. Jason died in the pool or in the lake. That's why the mom is killing people. I'm out. And then they made 2 and 3. 3 is regarded by a lot to be like the worst one until they get to like the end where those are like really the worst ones, where it's like Jason goes to hell and like Jason X, which is the space one, is like so far gone where it's not even fun. But like 3 is also really bad from what I hear. And so then they're like, okay, these aren't working anymore. We're just going to end it. This 4th one, it's going to be the last one. And then Frank Ziti's like, oh, this is the last one, huh? Well, I want to be a part of that then, because I started this and I want to end it. And so then he came back to do all of the practical effects for this movie, and they're pretty good. But these movies are so edited down when it comes to violence, not so much nudity. And I think it's kind of important to talk about, I guess, the public reception to these movies when they were coming out. Because I guess it's kind of similar to like what we talked about with the Hays Code last time. But like critics, and I guess like this is the 80s, right? We're in the midst of like the satanic panic. D&D is going to turn your kids into demon worshippers, and if you play Iron Maiden songs backwards, it tells you to kill people. Like we're in this era, and these movies are just watching teenagers fuck and die. And so like, you know, a lot of people were upset. I think there's a famous like clip of Siskel and Ebert reviewing these movies, and like, it is the most deplorable thing on the planet. If you like these movies, then you're like a sociopath, because it is just watching people die. And it's like, that is true. But you know, they can be kind of enjoyable. I will defend this type of movie, but I really didn't like these movies because Crispin Glover dies pretty early. And after that, all of the other characters are pretty boring. Like the final girl is Tommy Jarvis's sister, and she's like barely in it. The one kind of interesting thing that happens, like, none of the kills are even interesting because they were so edited down, because people were so upset about like the amount of violence and stuff in the first 3. Well, I guess the 2 that followed the first one, because the first one has the same problem where all of the deaths are like off screen. And like if there's any bit of like gore or anything, it's there for a second and then it cuts away. And I think the story goes is that like the ending shot where Jason dies, they really wanted to linger on that and like go all out on that. But like the studio was like, okay, well, if you have that, then you have to cut out like all of the other gore scenes because we don't want to get like an NC-17 rating. So they had to cut out a lot of the, like, I guess, explicit kill scenes, which is kind of funny. When you get to like the later ones, it's like so over the top. But back in the early days, they really had to fight for everything. So because of that, all of the kill scenes are really lame. Where it's like, yeah, Crispin Glover gets a corkscrew to the hand. You see it for like a second, and then you see like a machete go into his face for a second, and then it's gone. Where it's like a blink and you miss it kill is like, okay. Like, that's the whole point of these movies, is to have like interesting kills. Like, that is the point of a slasher movie. So it feels a little like, oh, lame. And kind of boring, because like the little bits of excitement you're supposed to get are barely there, and the rest of it is just people talking or having lame sex, which, I didn't think was possible, but it is. It's very lame. um, so yeah, I will say that the one kind of interesting thing that they do is with the ending, how Jason dies. Basically, it's established, Tommy Jarvis is a whiz kid extraordinaire that can do all these prosthetics. And so I think Girl finds a sketch of like a artist rendition of what Jason looked like before he was drowned. And so then she gives that to Tommy Jarvis, and then as she's distracting Jason so Tommy can run away, he's actually in the bathroom, like cutting his hair and like applying makeup to look like what Jason looked like, and then he's able to distract Jason for a second before he kills his sister, and then Jason does a funny slip and falls on his machete. Yeah, it's very sad. And it goes right through his eye, and then he just like slides down. That's like the one bit that's like gross and kind of cool, where it's like, and I haven't seen Day of the Dead. I know that is kind of regarded as Frank Ziti's like masterpiece in terms of his practical effects, but like I've never really like bought his stuff. Like, it doesn't look real. Where like there is some like practical stuff that like it looks too real, and I like kind of have to look away. It was like, because I don't really like gore. Like, when people like have surgery or whatever, and like, hey, do you want to see a picture? I'm like, no.
Why would I want to see that?
I don't know, but some people do. I know some people, they're like, oh yeah, show me. I don't like that. I don't even like looking at people's like hangnails. Like, I'm such a baby when it comes to seeing all like anything like that. And so like these movies, I never really buy any of these practical effects. Like, they don't really look real. And Jason's slipping and falling on his machete doesn't look real, but it's like, it's cool to look at. And that's like why I love horror movies of this era, where it's like, oh, that's not really believable, but I just more admire the technical aspects of like, okay, how did they do that? Like, I know it's probably just a bunch of latex and all like stuff like that, but it is kind of cool the things they're able to achieve with practical effects. I think like the gold standard is probably The Thing by John Carpenter. That movie has some of the best practical effects ever, I think. Still hold up like 50 years later, which is crazy. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, but it was pretty boring. The fourth one, honestly, wasn't a whole lot for me, and I just think that this franchise is not something that's really going to be up my alley, which I'm glad I discovered now, because I kind of had an idea to do the like Fast and Furious thing I did last summer. Well, 2 summers ago, where I watched every Fast and Furious movie. I'm like, it would be kind of fun to watch every Friday the 13th movie, because there's 10, well, like 12 if you count the Freddy versus Jason movies, which I don't. I guess I maybe should, but I have no interest in watching those. So yeah, but no, I don't think I'm going to, because I watched the best one and I didn't really like it. So it's all downhill from there, and I'm not really interested in watching any of those. So those are my thoughts and opinions on the Friday the 13th movies. Nightmare on Elm Street, not much better, but I like it more than I like the Friday the 13th movies. And I think some of that comes to, I mean, obviously Robert Englund's performance as Freddy is great. He definitely like hams it up later in the series, but in this first one, he's like genuinely scary. And I think a lot of that comes with like the makeup effects are also great. Like he genuinely looks like a burned up monster man. And like you see stuff from like later Nightmare on Elm Street movies and you can tell it's like a rubber mask and it doesn't really look like what it's supposed to look like. But yeah, he's like really scary, and it's a genuinely scary idea. Although I think it is somewhat played out now, where it's like, okay, if you die in your dream, you die in real life, and basically you can't go to sleep unless, or else I guess this demon man is going to kill you in your dreams, which are the best sequences in this movie for sure. And like I think it's really impressive how Wes Craven is able to capture the feeling of like a nightmare in this movie. Like there's like moments in these like nightmare sequences where it's like stuff doesn't really make sense and like stuff just kind of like comes up and appears out of nowhere, and it's like that like happens in like nightmares where it's like you think it's going one way and then like, oh, just something weird and out of the ordinary comes out, and like no one addresses it as being weird because it's like in the reality of the nightmare, which I think is really cool. It's really well done. But I think there's a couple missteps that I think are kind of hard to ignore, because you can tell it wanted to be a slasher movie. I mean, you give the guy 4 knives for fingers, so it's going to be a slasher movie. But I think, and maybe this is just modern day moviegoer me and not moviegoer in 1984 talking, but I think this movie would have been a whole lot more interesting if we never saw anyone else die to Freddy, because like the main character is Heather Langenkamp, who plays what's her name? I don't remember. But also Johnny Depp is in this movie.
Awesome.
I know. This is like, I think this might have been his first role because it says introducing Johnny Depp in the beginning. So, kind of interesting. He's not the main character. He's the main character's boyfriend, but he's an important supporting character, I guess. But, you know, it would be kind of interesting if it was just this chick that was being like haunted by Freddy, and you know she would have these dreams, and these scenes are in the movie where like she has these nightmares and there's a lot of like close calls that she has with Freddy, and it's kind of interesting because like it's not only that like if you die in your dream, you die in real life. It's also like if you're injured in your dream, then those injuries manifest themselves on your body, which is a really cool concept. But it's so lame that like you would think that like all of the adults would see that and like be like, okay, what is going on? Because like there's a moment where like she has a sleep study done and they're like watching her, like they're observing her as she is sleeping, and then she wakes up with a cut on her arm and she grabs Freddy's hat out of her dream and just has it now. And everybody's like, I don't know where she got that hat. And it's like, bro, you were watching her the entire time. There was a whole setup to this whole procedure. You presumably saw her like not have a hat and then lay down in the bed, and then you hooked her up to all these machines, and then she woke up and she just had a hat. And it's like, I think it would be pretty hard to hide that in your like hospital gown, because and maybe the hospital gowns were different in the 80s, but I don't think they have big pockets that could conceal a fedora. So it is a little unbelievable that the adults in the situation don't believe them, but maybe Wes Craven read it and was like, oh, well, this is what we do if we're going to have a bunch of kids be the protagonists. Like, the parents can't believe them. So I'm not sure. It just seems really unbelievable that, especially like to the degree that this movie goes, where it goes over the top, where it's kind of interesting. So like the first two kills are Freddy kind of like conceals them as being like, oh, well, kind of believable, where like, okay, the first girl that gets killed, like she has like stab wounds, and her like boyfriend is like known for carrying around like a switchblade, and he's been arrested on assault like a couple times. So everyone just pins it on him. And then when they arrest the boyfriend and Freddy kills him, they like hang him in his like jail cell with like bed sheets. So like that's well, yeah, who knows? Maybe he got Epstein. So that's kind of like a good way to conceal it, right? Is that like that would be a believable thing where it's like the parents would be like, oh, okay, so this one girl claims it's a weirdo murder man in her nightmares, but this is very believable. So whatever, she's just crazy, or she's going through shock or whatever, that her friends are dead. But then Johnny Depp dies, and there's a fountain of blood that shoots up from his bed into his ceiling, and his mom walks in on this and sees the blood shoot up from the ceiling, and the cops come, and they're like, oh, well, I don't know. I don't think anything unusual is happening. And I was like, how do you explain that? Do you think he just like exploded? Which is weird. It's very odd. But I think it would have been, get rid of all of that. Just have it be affecting the main girl and have like no one believe her. And then just over the course of the entire movie, have her doubt it. Where like she sees Freddy in her nightmares and she has a couple close calls, and so then she's like keeping herself up. She's like drinking coffee. She's, I don't know, downing Monster energy drinks all the time, which I guess this would have to be a modern remake. But she's like, you know, she's just mainlining caffeine all day, every day to stay up. And because of that, then she's hallucinating. And like, you could go into like all of those things, all of those weirdo, I don't even know if they're real, but like those like creepy pastas of like, oh, Russian experiments in the basement of a Soviet base, they kept men, you know, like that story where it's like, you know, they basically forced a bunch of people to stay up as long as possible and they all went insane.
In reality, it's like a Halloween decoration that they turn into a story.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which is impressive.
Yeah, but you know, like folk story. You can do, you can play into that where it's like, oh, is she going crazy, or is she actually seeing this monster man that's trying to kill her in her dreams? And there's manifests that affect her like real body, but is this a real body, or is she still dreaming? This, I think, would be actually a really, really compelling movie, but this movie has to be a slasher, so more people have to die, because Halloween was a very big and successful movie. And went on to be a very great franchise, actually. I think all of those sequels ended up being huge hits, both financially and critically. Everyone loves all of the Halloween movies, especially the new ones. Everyone loves those. And the guy who made those went on to make the new Exorcist movie, which everyone also loves. So, you know, it's a very successful chain of events here. So I don't know. Maybe this is modern moviegoer watching an old movie and critiquing it for not being a modern movie, because I feel like I just explained like an A24 horror movie, which we'll get to, but I don't know. I still liked it, but it didn't grab me as much as I maybe wanted it to, unfortunately. But I will say that this is probably my favorite one out of the bunch, but that's really not saying much. But yeah, we'll definitely talk about Wes Craven more. Definitely one of the most influential, also a weird dude. But he made Nightmare on Elm Street, he made Scream, also made some cult classic movies like Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes. So made weirdo cult horror movies and also made, I guess, two of the most successful horror franchises of all time. So very interesting fella. I will be getting to those two cult movies. Well, they're not about cults, I don't think. I don't know. I think The Hills Have Eyes is about a cannibal, or like a cannibalistic society. So maybe that's a cult. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I will be talking about those, just not right now, and not in this horror marathon, because next week we will be talking about the jump scare popcorn horror era of very, very scary stuff of the late 2000s, early to mid 2010s. I think maybe the death rattle of that was the It movie, the first one. I don't know. I know a lot of people liked it, but I don't know. We'll see. I will watch that one, just not in this horror marathon. So next week we're going to be watching Paranormal Activity, The Conjuring, and Insidious, all of which are still getting installments in their respective franchises, I think. Well, I know Insidious just did, and The Conjuring just did too. But I don't know if Paranormal Activity is still getting...
I think they already made like 7 of those.
They did. I don't know if they're still making them. Maybe not.
They have like a sub, like it's kind of still one, but it's not named the same.
I know The Conjuring's like that.
Oh,
where they're like, this is The Nun 2.
yeah.
This is Annabelle.
Megan.
That's not a Conjuring movie.
But it could be.
They could be in the next Conjuring movie. I'm not sure. It looks like the last Paranormal Activity movie was made in 2021, so somewhat recent. It has a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I don't know. Maybe they're tapped out at 7, and they're like, that's enough. But it will be kind of interesting. I did kind of want to have a whole week set aside to found footage movies, because those were huge, largely in part to Paranormal Activity, but also the Blair Witch Project. But we won't do that. We'll just try to keep it to this jump scare, popcorn horror, spooky ghost with long mouth era, I think is maybe more appropriate. I'm not sure. I guess I'll come back and report next week. This is the week that I am least looking forward to by far. Basically, I really do not like jump scares, so this is definitely going to come into effect when we talk about these movies. But these are movies I need to watch because I don't need to, but I have a list of 1,500 movies that I need to watch, and these are on it. So I will be watching them at some point, so I figured why not get them knocked out all in 1 week. I've been having trouble sleeping, not related to this horror marathon, just because some of my medicines have been shifted around and it's affecting how I'm sleeping, and so hopefully this doesn't mess with it too much, but I guess we'll see. So come back Next week, if you're interested in talking, or I guess listening to me talk about those three movies, I do want to talk about this marathon, and that we are ending, of course, with the week after with the modern age. And then after that, we're going to take a little break from horror, obviously, because we just spent 5 weeks on it.
You're doing Christmas movies.
No, no, we're not. We might have a week of that when we get to December, because there surprisingly there is like three. Well, I can probably find 3 Christmas movies on that list that I have not seen. I know I need to watch A Christmas Story, which I've heard is bad, but
Christmas Vacation will always be the best one.
that one's great. I'm also a big fan of Klaus, which I think came out in 2021. A great hand-drawn animated movie. It's on Netflix. I heard about it when I was in art school, and like people were talking about, wow, it's so cool that there's a hand-drawn animated movie that's getting a wide release. And then I didn't watch it, and then I watched it for the first time last year, and it was really, really good. So I do want to plug that one because I probably won't talk about it, but yeah. So we're not doing Christmas movies the week after the marathon is over. We're actually going to spend a week watching African movies. We talked about it, I think, before this marathon started. And I had basically said I'm interested in watching some African movies because I think, frankly, it's an area of the world that is underrepresented in the like film I don't know, landscape, what people are talking about, especially when it comes to like older movies. I feel like Africa as the entire continent is kind of written off as not as important as like Japanese stuff or French stuff or hell, even like American stuff, as being like influential and stuff. And yeah, I mean, they were more underground, but I do want to seek that out because even on my list of 1,500 movies I need to watch before I die, none of them are African, unless you want to count the Battle of Algiers, which is French, and I don't. That was weird. I was looking up lists of African movies, and a bunch of like lists from like film publications included movies that were made in Italy and France but took place in Africa. I'm like, I don't think you guys get the point of your own list because yeah. So the week after, we are going to be watching Tuki Buki, Black Girl, and Cairo Station. All of those are movies made in Africa. I think Cairo is Egyptian, Black Girl is Senegalese, and I don't know what Tuki Buki is off the top of my head. But we'll talk about those. I did want to give a heads up because these movies are hard to find because they aren't on VOD services. The only way to watch Cairo Station, for example, is through like a weird subscription service called like Fandor, or you can find a copy of it on YouTube. Like it's not even on any of the rental services, which is weird. I don't know what it is about African stuff that is just, I don't know if there's just not demand for it because people don't know anything about it. I'm not sure. So I wanted to give a heads up if you are interested in African cinema and you want to track down a copy of these before our discussion on, let me see, it'll be on the 16th of November, I think, if our schedule is to play out how I believe it to be. So there you go. I just wanted to shout that out. Also to shout out 3 very important movies in African cinema that I'm very excited to watch. So there you go. That's going to do it for my segment. I think I'll throw it on over to Babby for his part of the show.
Yeah, me.
Music time, since I didn't do it last week, and
What?
there's a decent amount. Yeah, I guess I will start with Earl Sweatshirt since that album technically came out like 2 months ago, and then I was late doing the re-release to streaming services, so this is very late, but it's
Oh, yeah.
fine. Yeah, Voyeur Dyer is on streaming services now. 11 songs, 26 minutes in classic Earl Sweatshirt fashion. I feel like since some rap songs, he hasn't gone over 26 minutes.
Yeah.
Vita Clay is like 23 or something, which is fine. I mean, I feel like that's a good amount of Earl Sweatshirt because you can only handle so much Earl Sweatshirt in one record, I think. Not to say that it's not enjoyable, but he is so like monotone and just cool that like I feel like you just get lost
Yeah.
after a certain time. But this album's really good. I don't think it like lived up to the pretty intense, you know, anticipation for it. I think the NFT thing kind of ruined the hype around this record.
Yeah.
I think artists should just stop doing that altogether. Especially when it's like Alchemist. Like, dog, I know you know how to make like your fair share because like you do all these vinyl releases and stuff, and it's a really good system. There's no reason to be doing this NFT thing. So safe to say, I don't think they're going to be doing that again. But the record is good. I mean, there's not too much to say about it because it is one Earl Sweatshirt. If you've listened to any Earl Sweatshirt record since like 2017, you know exactly what you're in for. And it's Alchemist, who is just all over the place at this point, doing like multiple collab albums every single year. So it's like one of those things where it's like, yep, it's good, and people knew it was going to be good, and it's like a very consistent combo of people. So, I mean, it's great. It's not gonna be like the top rap album of the year or anything. I don't. It's very low key, like very. It's just something that you put on, and it's like, yep, this is really good. I think there's two Vince Staples features on this thing. Both are fantastic. I feel like Vince does a really good job of picking up the energy when he needs to. Like he comes in on the 5th song and then the 10th song, so it kind of breaks it up nice. Because even when Mike is like featured on track 3, I mean Mike is great on that song, but Mike also has kind of the same monotone matching Earl, and it's like I need something, please.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the same time, that's their style, and I do enjoy it. It's just like it's hard to talk about key moments of the record when everything is just kind of like, yep, here it is. But yeah, beats are fantastic. I do love the variety of tracks. There is still quite a bit of variety. You have some where it's like, oh, this is just a classic Alchemist beat, and then some where he goes more onto like actual instrumentation and stuff. That sounds pretty good. So, yeah, definitely still worth your time. I mean, definitely worth your time. It's 26 minutes long. I mean, come on, do anything when you're listening to it, and it'll be over before you know it. But I still think the Caliphate is probably the best song on here with Vince because, man, that is just fantastic. That is classic Alchemist. It's just one of those songs where it's like, ooh, that's kind of timeless hip-hop. Heat Check's really great as well. Again, Mancala with Vince is also fantastic. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that one. I feel like I would have had more, but, like, I don't know. I can't talk about Earl Sweatshirt at length.
Yeah.
Because he is so much just Earl Sweatshirt. So, that was good. Drizzy Drake released his album.
Yes.
I can't hold myself to go through all of that, but I have heard most of the songs in passing, but I have not sit down and actually listened to it myself. General consensus is, why did you make it an hour and 24 songs long? Please limit yourself. Like, why are you doing this? You don't need to be doing this every single time. If you took off like 15 tracks, you'd have a pretty decent record. yeah, I don't know why he insists on like constantly making records this long. I've given up on Drake like 3 or 4 years ago at this point. So now it's just kind of like I get excited to see everybody get hyped up and then get disappointed as soon as he drops an album. So, but I mean, 8 a.m. in Charlotte is fantastic. That's the thing. It's like he makes a song like that, and it's like, oh, he can do this, and then he just chooses not to for like an entire album.
Yeah.
Because 8 a.m. in Charlotte is genuinely like an amazing song. It has a Conductor beat, which is crazy. Like Conductor does stuff with like Makami and Griselda and like all those underground kind of coke rap people. So for him to be on a Drake record is like pretty insane. I wish he would have put his beat tag on there. I feel like Drake probably paid him to not put it on, but it would have been really great because his beat tag is one of the most like in your face obnoxious things. But it goes hard. But yeah, I think 8 a.m. in Charlotte is the best song off of here that I've heard. Yeah, I feel like a fun time is just going through Ungenius and looking through all these songs, and you'll find how much like garbage lines he throws everywhere. Just through kind of like skimming through the record, there was a whole bunch where I was like, "What are you saying?" Yeah, I mean, some people are enjoying it, but I mean, again, it's something where it's like it's so middle of the road and mediocre that nobody's really going to be talking about it in like, a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because like I forgot he even did a 21 Savage collab record like last year.
21 do something for me.
Exactly. That's the only thing I remember from that record, and I didn't even remember it existed until I was looking at Drake's discography again. I'm like, oh yeah. So that's just a little detour. I'm not going to talk about Drake that much. Next, we had the Boy Genius EP. The Rest, I think, is what they called it. It's pretty good. 4 tracks, 12 minutes. Your typical kind of array of Boy Genius songs, I would say. You have a Julian led, a Phoebe led, and then a Lucy led, and then kind of a all-arounder. Yeah, I mean, it's good. You can definitely tell that these were ones that they had to leave off the main record. That being said, I mean, if you get these three in a room, they're going to make some good stuff. It just does not have the same like staying power as anything on the main record did. I think Powers is like maybe my favorite. I feel like that's the kind of like Julian Baker led song that I really, really flock to. So that one was pretty fantastic. Afraid Heights is also good. And I think Voyager was the Phoebe one. Yeah, I feel like I've had enough like really slow Phoebe ones. Especially like with the ending of the record, with Letter to an Old Poet. Like that's the ultimate one for me.
Yeah.
So I feel like I didn't need another one, but at the same time, it's like it's nice to have. So, I mean, it's a good AP. You should definitely check it out still. But I don't think you're gonna find anything that's better than what was on the record. But that album is really fantastic. So it's kind of it shows the quality. I mean, I feel like they did a pretty good job keeping to the 12 tracks in the main record. I don't think I'd take anything from this EP and like plug it in place of something else on the main record. But they gotta start calling these things not record and the rest and stuff because it's hard to talk about.
Yeah.
The EP. But yeah, now that I feel like this kind of like closes up this album cycle for them, I would think. So I am looking forward to solo projects from all of them in the next couple of years, hopefully.
Yeah.
I could take another Lucy record.
I could too, for sure.
I feel like all of them have improved throughout the past couple of years, and they're like pretty popular now, which is kind of cool to see. Like really, really popular. I think they like sold out Madison Square Garden like a couple weeks ago, which is insane. But yeah, good stuff. Obviously Sufjan, but we will talk about that in the retrospective,
Yes.
and we have a reaction to it. So
We
look
do.
at that. We can skip to a single. Danny Brown released a single this week, Tantor, and he announced Quaranta is dropping November 17th. So he is actually doing it this year, which is crazy because I feel like at the beginning of the year we knew this thing was coming and it was just nothing for the longest time. And then we had that Peggy collab record, and then it was kind of radio silence. But finally, we have some confirmation here. Looks like it's going to be 11 songs, 34 minutes. I'm really excited for this thing. It's been a long time since there's been. Yeah, 2019 was the last Danny Brown solo record, and that record was good. It was just really quirked up compared to Exhibition, which is just really, really something. That's an insane album too. But the single Tantor is really good. Danny Brown's the only person who can like really lean into these old memes and make them sound cool. He uses like an old Office meme and a whole bunch of other old meme sound effects at the end, and it doesn't feel out of place, which is kind of insane because I feel like in any song that would stand out. I feel like he's definitely leaned into his scaring the hose mode a little bit more with these beat selections, which is cool. I like how quirky it is. But I mean, it's still pretty fantastic. You can still view it as like a song that isn't just like a jokey kind of novelty song. I don't know. It's just really fun. So I'm pretty excited for this. I feel like he's kind of entering this new lane in his career, which is fantastic. The best line on the song is easily "Got a Mexican homie named Chinese Mike." That's just been stuck in my head all night or all week. It's great. So definitely looking forward to this one. So yeah, that'll be coming in November. Peggy had some stuff to say this week too. He officially announced that he's releasing the remastered Ghost Pop tape. That should be coming out any day now. Because he said, I don't know, he said something on Twitter yesterday where he was like, it's done and this will be the last like remaster from the old catalog before he moves on to like his new stuff, which he also said is also coming this year. And you're running out of time, buddy. That's all I'm saying. But I will talk about the Ghost Pop tape when the re-release comes out because I feel like I haven't had a chance to really talk about that record, and that's like a very, very, very it's cool. It's very different. It's like one of the first vaporwave albums, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, we'll talk about that, and then hopefully his new album whenever, if that actually is a thing, and he's not just doing the artist thing where it's like you're gonna get it this year, and then we never do. So there's that. This King Gizzard record comes out this Friday. I forgot about that.
Who does it?
The Silver Chord. Yeah. I don't think we're gonna do a reaction to it or anything. They've released 3 songs off of it already, and I'm guessing it's gonna be a seamless 28-minute album.
Yeah.
Which makes it hard to talk about. So we probably won't do a reaction to that, but I will talk about it next week, most likely. What else? Oh yeah, the new Sampha record came out. Lahai, I think is how you say it. I'm actually gonna put this on my wheel. This might be a fun reaction. It's been a while since we've done like some new R&B stuff, so I'm gonna throw it on the wheel. We'll see if we can get a good reaction out of that one.
Okay.
Because I think you'd probably enjoy it quite a bit. So that was my thinking there, but I did have 2 more albums that I did listen to this week. There were some bangers that came out this week. I guess we'll start with Reverend Kristen Michael Hayter, which is Lingua Ignota's new stage name.
Oh.
So this is her first record under this new name, and it's called Saved in the style that Peggy would do, all caps with an exclamation point. Yeah, it's definitely different than the record I've heard from her, which is Sinner Get Ready. She played into a lot more of like traditional old school folk on that record, but she didn't like fully lean into it. I feel like this is where she finally like fully committed. Like this is full, like it says it in the genre, Appalachian folk music. That's exactly what it sounds like. That mixed with like literal like gospel, like Southern gospel. It is weird, and it is very disturbing, which is meant. It's a Lingua Ignota album. It's going to be disturbing.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's really cool. It's really inventive. I was not raised in a church environment, but I imagine if anybody that was listening to this record, it'd be a lot more emotionally taxing than it was for me. Because a lot of these, like the mixing on these, like one of the tracks sounds like it's coming out of like the old church speakers. The mixing on everything is really, really deliberate. A lot of stuff is blown out. The first track feels like the mix is getting like an aux cord being like pulled out and pulled back in, like the level of the song, like the levels go down and up in kind of a weird way. It sounds like it's kind of like cutting out of transmission. She speaks on tongues on this record at the end of some songs, which is really bizarre. If you've never heard anybody speak in tongues, it's really intense. Especially on the last song, I feel like she ends the record like that, and it goes on for a couple minutes, and it's just like, this is not nice to my ears. But it's pretty great. I need to listen to it more. It's one of those things where you kind of just, if you're ever in the mood for something kind of spooky and ominous and stuff like that, it's definitely cool to check out. Not to mention just her pure musical talent. Like her vocal range on this record is absolutely insane, and it kind of has to, because like a lot of these are so skeletal and like there's not a lot going on in the mix. You get some piano and you get a little bit of organ and stuff, and a folk guitar, and that's pretty much it. Besides all this weird mixing stuff, but really, really, really good. I don't know if I have a favorite out of these. I feel like a lot of them are really good, honestly. It's just not something you listen to every day, because it's literally sounds like you're listening to like gospel folk music, but like with a weird kind of, I don't know, it's distorted. I can't tell if she's being genuine or being sarcastic. I think it's a blend of both. It's really hard to kind of dissect her writing when it comes to like the faith aspect of it, because she plays with that a lot, and I find it really interesting. But really, really, really good. Check it out if you're in for a spooky album or something like that. I mean, that's almost Halloween. Go for it.
Very close. Well,
Very close.
This is going to be the last podcast episode before Halloween.
Yes.
We're going to be recording the next one on Halloween.
That's so scary.
I know. I'm frightened already.
Eek. And then the other record I listened to this week, I don't have a lot to say about it because I need to listen to it more, but I did check it out because, again, anything with shoegaze in the genre listing on the new albums that is like highly ranked, I'm going to listen to automatically. So this one is Census Designated by Jane Remover. I believe they were on the latest Underscores album, which I still haven't gotten to. I need to get to that one because people are still going crazy about that. But this is a like shoegaze kind of noise indie rock kind of deal. It's 10 songs and an hour long, which for me is like, that's perfect. I love that because every track's kind of a piece on its own. And it's really good. Just the overall sound of it is pretty fantastic. Fully leaning into shoegaze, but still keeping it very kind of in line with typical like indie rock trends. It's not like My Bloody Valentine beats you over the head shoegaze. It's more deliberate. But I don't know. It sounds really great. I definitely need to listen to it more. I have no idea who this artist is, honestly. It's just one of those things where it's like, oh, I found an album that I want to listen to, and I'm just going to listen to it and not dig into it at all. I know their 2021 record, Frailty, was like also pretty highly rated, so I might go and check that one out. That one leaned more into like hyperpop and more glitchy stuff. So it's interesting that like a lot of people in the similar lane are transitioning into shoegaze. I feel like that's something that is going to be pretty natural because I feel like shoegaze is making a comeback more and more as we see throughout the years, which is good because that's one of my favorite genres. But yeah, very good. Check it out. I need to listen to it more to fully actually talk about it and be, fair with my assumptions of the record because I don't remember what a lot of the songs like. It's one of those where you listen to it and it's like, all right, that was great, but I can't pick out what song is what. So definitely need to look at that more. But those are all the main things I had. I don't think there was any more news. Apparently there's a Kanye and Ty Dolla $ign collab album that they're doing a stadium release party for. I don't care. It's not interesting to me. I'm not even going to listen to it probably. I'm done with that. So
You don't think Kanye has reformed his ways?
even if he did, I don't care. I feel like it's way too much energy to even be in that realm. And sometimes the music's good, sometimes the music's not. Donda was a good album, but that was the last I really needed from him, because then Donda 2 came out and it was unfinished and it was the worst thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And I was, after that point, I was like, I'm done. And then he wilded out for a while. Yeah.
Yep.
I feel like he completely went off the deep end, and you'd have to make something that's better than Twisted Fantasy for me to get back to listening at this point. So I feel like we as a society have surpassed the need for Kanye West.
I agree.
I feel like we'll be fine.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. Well, I'll put Sanfa on my wheel, so we should get a reaction to that eventually. I'll probably, lean towards doing that one sooner rather than later, if the wheel so chooses.
Okay.
I still need to listen to the new Slauson Malone record, because that came out, and everything Slauson Malone's put out has been really, really, really great. But that's going to be another really weird avant-garde, artsy album that I need to somehow put into words. But I'll think about that for next week if I have time to listen to it. But that's what we got. I didn't plan anything for this segment this week because it's kind of hard to write a research paper every week, and I'm not going to force myself to do it every week. So when I have time, I will do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But listen to last week if you want the big old boy that I did. I won't really do anything this week. There's been a couple of updates, but I'm not gonna be we're not gonna be doing news on this thing.
No.
If anything major happens, I'll cover it, or if there's any shifts that I find interesting and can pull some stuff out of, we'll do that. But I'm not gonna force it every week. But that's it, I think.
All right. Well, sounds good. Then I guess that's it for this week's podcast. Next week is Paranormal Activity, Conjuring, Insidious. I don't know where those movies are. I should have looked that up beforehand.
What's the horror streaming service?
Shudder.
Shudder.
It might be on there. I'm not sure. I think Shudder kind of got Netflixed, where like now Paramount wants theirs, and everybody wants theirs on their own now that everyone has their own. So I'm not sure. I know Shudder still has like a lot of like really great horror B movies, stuff like that. Just stuff that's not like your super well-known ones. So it's still well worth it, and it's not very expensive. This is not an ad for Shudder. But
Not yet.
Not yet. If Shudder wants to reach out and sponsor the podcast, I will shill for Shudder.
Sponsors after last week.
No, probably not.
Just don't look at that one.
Well, we're not getting sponsors anyway, so
Yeah, true.
it's fine. But if Shudder does want to, I would look at some of their stuff. Who knows? Maybe they have The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left or something. I'm not sure.
I feel like Shudder's whole thing is like kind of trashy horror movies.
Yeah.
Or like the more like party horror movies or arcade. I don't know what to call that genre.
I call them popcorn horror.
Yeah, that's a good descriptor.
Yeah. I don't know where I got that. I can't have come up with that by myself. So I'm not sure. I'm looking at their what is it? Their stuff right now. And like I'm seeing they have like Evil Dead 2. They have Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Of course.
Autopsy of Jane Doe. That's I forgot they have Mandy. Now that's a movie I need to see.
Mandy.
Now that's a Nick Cage cult revenge movie that's like highly stylized with like a bunch of like neon lights and stuff.
Nice.
That's well worth the price of admission alone. But yeah, I think it's like $5 a month. And if you're like really into horror, even the not so great ones. I think I don't know. I don't know. I like supporting the small guys, and I know they aren't like a local business, but I don't know. They have a niche thing, and it's kind of cool that it exists. Now, make a schlocky. I don't even know what kinds of movies I like, because I like schlocky action movies, and I also like dark indie dramas. So make one like that, and I'll be there. Even if they're not good, I'll probably still buy it. But yeah, I don't know. I think Insidious is on Max. I'm not sure where Conjuring and Paranormal Activity are. But they aren't underground movies, so they're probably on something. So shouldn't have to search too far for them. But if you don't care about spoilers, or if you're not going to watch those movies, then it doesn't really matter. But there you go. That's it for the podcast. So long.